All right.
So I don't know how many of you are from Texas or from the Dallas area. We are in Frisco. We are a children's science hands-on museum. Obviously, we are closed right now, but we wanted to do a series of webinars pretty much once every week just to keep you guys engaged with some activities you can do or some cute little cool little animals that you can meet. And this is one of our junior naturalist webinars for the month of April.
All right, so just so that everybody can try and use that chat box, my first question is, because I will be asking some questions throughout this, is what is your favorite type of animal? So Miss Sloan's gonna pull up that chat box so we can read them aloud, but my favorite animal is the Virginia opossum. And this is a picture of one of the babies that I had the pleasure of taking care of. So I'm gonna open this chat box so I can see. What?
Penguins. Oh my goodness. I had a spelling error. I apologize.
Penguins.
Whale shark. I love whale sharks.
Cat people. I also enjoy cats. My cat acts more like a dog than a cat though, so.
Oh,
okay.
It's okay. It's you.
That's awfully cute. Nice.
Oh, hi Jackson.
Hey.
Wolves.
Wolves.
Nice.
Oh, and a Komodo dragon. That's pretty cool.
Awesome. All right, so we're gonna get started. I'm gonna figure out how to change the slide. Okay, so just like Miss Sloan introduced before, we're Sci-Tech Discovery Center. We're a hands-on kids museum. Obviously, right now we are not open. We just wanted to do some of these little shows or webinars just to keep you guys all engaged during these times. So if you want more information about our museum, you can
Hold on a second there, Miss Marquita. You were having a little glitch there. She was just saying that if you were looking for more information, our website is mindstretchingfun.org.
Yes. All right, so my first friend we're gonna meet today, his name is Dan. Other people also call him Dan the Man or Daniel. I'm going to leave the screen really quick and go and grab him. With this beautiful picture of him hanging out in the grass that I took earlier.
Yes, on April 1st, April Fool's Day, Dan the Man took over our social media and he was photographed doing all sorts of cool things. He was barbecuing, he was typing on a laptop. Oh, here he is.
So this is Dan. If you want, you guys can go up to my screen and I believe you can pin it so that it becomes larger on your screen. Otherwise, you can just look at my chat box or my visual box here. But this is Dan. He is a full-grown male bearded dragon. I recently learned that there are really cool other color morphs. He's just a typical normal color morph, which makes him kind of boring, but that's okay. We don't find him too boring. They're originally from Australia and New Guinea. Their lifespan is upwards to 10 years. I think the longest lived bearded dragon in captivity was about 20, which is pretty cool. So we'll have Dan for a long time yet. They are omnivores, so even though Dan does not always prefer to eat his vegetables, he is supposed to eat them. He also eats meat, however, so every once in a while we'll give him some mealworms or some crickets. But since he is an adult, he actually should be eating more salads now than he should be eating worms, which he does not approve of. Obviously, all of you prefer your dino chicken nuggets over broccoli.
Yeah, one of Dan's favorite things to eat would be strawberries. They're high in sugar, so we do try to keep that down in his diet. Just like any proper diet, you have to have it balanced, but that is a special treat for him. I don't know how many of you like strawberries. I don't know if you also love to eat strawberries with insects. Yes, no?
Gross. All right, so as you can see, Dan does have some of these spikes along his belly. Not all bearded dragon types have these, but he does. He also has some spikes along his face and under his chin. The reason they're called bearded dragons is because of this really amazing beard he has. It's a bit brown, but it's off to get him out here. It's getting a little chilly, which means he's going to become a little bit darker because he's a little angry, but that's okay. If he comes across something he does not like my cat at one point tried to tap him ever so nicely. He puffed up, got really big, got really dark, puffed that beard out, opened his mouth, and kind of just gaped at her for a really long time, threatening his tiny little teeth.
So if you guys could imagine if you were a puffer fish and you were going to puff up, everyone show me if you have your screens on how you would puff up like a puffer fish. You kind of blow up your cheeks, right? Well, for him, it would be his whole chin, down his whole neck. Now imagine that all of those spikes sticking out. Would you want to keep harassing that animal or try to eat that animal if all those spikes are sticking out? I don't think so. But he does have a secret. Miss Marquita is going to tell you his spiky secret.
Yes, so his spikes aren't actually sharp at all. They're kind of, they call them fake spikes. So I can touch them right here. Every once in a while when he puffs up, he'll graze against me and it gives me a little bit of a scratch, but never or anything like that. So he's kind of a fakester when it comes to that. With his colorations, he can camouflage with his surroundings. He can't change colors like I said before, but his color changes aren't like yellow and blue and purple or anything. A big way that I understand if he's doing okay or if he's healthy or happy is because he will be more of this tan color when he's kind of having a good day. Underneath his chin will be, he's trying to jump onto the keyboard, will be kind of like his day. But if he's having a bad day, he tends to be a little bit more dark. Hey man, chill.
Show him how he likes to be held with you, because he works with you the most and you're kind of his main person, almost like his mom.
Yes.
So that's where he feels the most comfortable. If he can be up high and looking down on everyone, if you think about him in the wild, you look at that picture we had on the screen, if he was down on the ground, someone could step on him or swoop on him. But if he's up high, he can get a clear view of the room. Is there a cat? Is there a person? So being perched is a really comfortable thing for a lot of animals. It's not that just that he loves to snuggle with his human person, but he also just gets to have a better view around him.
He also does have this super long tail. We're going to be looking at some lizards in a minute that also have tails, but they look very different from his. Dan uses his tail for defense. He does whack it at things that he does not enjoy, but also they use it for balance and climbing. So he is not a type of lizard that can remove his tail and then grow it back. If he were to lose his tail, it would be gone forever. So he does protect this tail. Most of the time, he doesn't let other people touch his tail. Today, he's being really nice and kind of forgiving of me. But normally, if I go and I kind of touch that tail like that, he kind of gives me a little whack. He does not like that. All right, so he's getting a little anxious right now. So I think I'm just going to put him in the windowsill and get my other friends.
Before you put him away, Miss Marquita, would you be able to show the sides of his heads? Let's see if anyone can notice that he has an eye, but he also has a hole. Any idea, if someone wants to type in the chat box, what that hole could be? Why is there a hole on the side of his head? All right, someone's guessed nose, someone has guessed ears. His nose is in the front of his face. Those are his ears. They're different from your ears. If you take a look at someone in the room with you, you have an earlobe, a floppy earlobe that helps sound get in. You'll notice Dan does not have that floppy earlobe. He doesn't want other things getting in there like sand or dirt, because he spends a lot of time down by the sand and the dirt. So he has just that opening, and there's actually a little membrane in there. The opening doesn't go deep down like a tunnel. There is a little membrane to protect him in case some dirt does get in there. But that a lot of animals without a floppy earlobe are just going to have that hole.
All right, so I'm going to grab my next friends. Move to the next slide so you guys can look at some of these cute pictures I took.
Oh. Now, has anyone ever had this kind of animal or pet this kind of animal or seen one in person? All right, Logan has one, pretty cool. So all of our animals are animals that you could find as a pet out in Texas. They are not wild animals. We would never take an animal from its home in the wild.
So this is one of our leopard geckos. His name is Lawrence. We have two leopard geckos that stay with us at Sci-Tech, one named Laura and one named Lawrence. I am not 100% sure if Lawrence is actually a boy yet, because he came to us a little bit thin, and so it's a little bit hard for me to check if he's a boy or a girl yet, and he's still a little bit young, so it will still take a little bit longer for me to identify whether Lawrence is actually a Lawrence, but that's okay. So if you notice, he looks very different from Laura. Just like the bearded dragons, leopard geckos come in different colors and different sizes. I learned that there are like giant ones. So he's not a giant one, but he is considered a baldy hypomelanistic because he does not have any spots. So if you notice one of those pictures that I have, he does have some spots on his tail. They came in after being with us for a couple of weeks and having one of his first sheds. Some of his little spots on his tail came through, but since then he hasn't really grown any other spots, so I don't think he will.
So we've used a big term there, baldy hypomelanistic, and some of those words might sound familiar to you. Baldy, because compared to the other leopard gecko, what does he appear to be missing? Not hair.
It does have to do with his head though.
It is spots, you're right. So because he's missing spots, we've got that baldy name. Hypo and hyper, sometimes you hear those words when you think of something like hypoglycemic, hyperglycemic. One means it has too much and one means it doesn't have a lot. So hypo means he's missing a lot of. And melanistic, that word kind of sounds like melanin. If anyone has ever heard anyone talk in biology about melanin, that's something that you find in your hair, in your skin, different amounts of melanin, different shades in your hair and your skin. So the melanin is going to give him those dark spots. And because he is hypomelanistic, he doesn't have a lot of melanin, so he's not going to have a lot of dark spots compared to the other animal. Now, when Lawrence came into us, he was being taken care of by a family, but they didn't do a lot of research on how to take care of him. So they did not know that he needed one super important ingredient in his life. And without that ingredient, he was not able to grow strong bones and he was very weak. Any guess as to what that ingredient was? This is a very tricky question. He needed something to help him have strong bones. All right, so you've got a guess of calcium. Absolutely. And it wasn't just a matter of giving him calcium in his food. He needed vitamin D in his body to make that calcium. And there's something around us all the time that helps our body get vitamin D. And if he was hiding in a closet, he wasn't able to get that vitamin D. So Evan and Sarah are right. It was the sun. He was never put out in the sun, so he never had vitamin D in his body, making him calcium. It seems like a weird thing to compare the sunlight and the bones, but for a lot of reptiles, if you don't take proper care of them and give them plenty of sunlight, they're not going to have good bone structure.
All right, so I'm going to get Laura and we're going to talk a little bit more about, a little bit more about our leopard geckos. So let me grab Laura.
So now that we've been giving Lawrence more sunlight, we've also been putting a special heat lamp that gives off the same rays of light that he needs from sunlight. He has been getting better with his coloring. You may notice in this picture, his toes look a little strange. Some of them that never quite developed, and he can't put all of his weight on all of his toes. So it is important to know exactly what your animal needs.
All right, so this is Laura. She does not enjoy being held for as long as Lauren, so we're gonna just kind of take this as much as we can. But you notice she has a lot more spots. So she's actually kind of a common leopard gecko. However, I did notice that she's considered a high yellow, which means she has a lot more yellow in her than the natural type of leopard gecko. And the natural type of leopard gecko would be a lot darker than this so that they can blend in with their surroundings, because leopard geckos are found in India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and they would be found in very arid, dry, sandy areas. So she would want to blend in with her surroundings. So she's kind of high yellow, but that comes from being bred at pet stores and things like that, where they prefer these brighter colors. So she doesn't have a whole lot of spots on her middle section. Most of her spots are on her head and on her tail. A cool fact about leopard geckos is they are one of the types of lizards that if they lose their tail, they can grow it back. So it's actually a defense mechanism for them. If they are super stressed out and they think it's the last effort to stay alive, they will detach their tail from the rest of their body. So there are two bone structures, and they'll actually detach right at the base of her tail right here. And this tail will keep wiggling for a little while, and that will give her enough time that she can escape from the predator or anything that was scaring her at the time. Her body is very special in that it won't allow her to bleed a whole lot, and it takes about 65 days for her tail to grow back. So having a leopard gecko do this in the wild is actually kind of dangerous for them because they store a lot of fats and like waters in their tails. So if they go a long time without eating, they don't have to starve to death. But if they lose that tail and then go a long time without eating, they don't have a lot of those extra fat reserves to keep them alive.
If you guys look at the picture we have of Laura on the nice shot straight down, it's a little easier to see her. You'll notice that her tail looks like what? You can answer in the chat. What does her tail kind of look like? It's plumper than you would think for a tail. It's got the similar spots. What do you think she was hoping that that tail would look like to confuse an animal? That's right, Brian's got it. It's the head. So if someone bit off her head, she's not gonna survive. But if someone bites at the tail, she can, as Miss Marquita said, let go of that tail and they'll think, great, I've got something to eat, and then she can scurry away. And sometimes the tail will actually continue to twitch to keep the attention of the predators so they don't pay attention to her leaving. And after this has happened once or twice, the tail never grows back to be as plump and in the same size and shape. So we know that Laura has never lost her tail. That is her original tail. We would not want her to lose it.
Yeah, so we're very gentle with her. She can be a little bit more temperamental and not as forgiving as Lawrence. So sometimes she doesn't really enjoy being held, but she's gotten better about it.
And Lawrence is also, again, he's recuperating, so his strength and energy just isn't there. When he gets, you know, a little better, he may be a little more squirmy and wiggly.
Yes. All right, so.
One question. Do you want to hold Laura up to the camera and see if people can find her ears?
Yes, let me see if she'll stop moving for a minute.
So she also does not have earlobes, so you're going to look for the same kind of hole on the side. It is hard because it is camouflaged with those spots. It looks like a crescent moon shape. She did stick out her tongue. Yep, sometimes she's just exploring the world around her. She does have those bumps on her back, those sandy little bumps. So it is hard to kind of look for things like her ears, but
they are very good climbers, as you can tell. In the wild, they wouldn't climb too high like the bearded dragon, but they are very adventurous. They would find lots of rocks and crevices to climb into. They're kind of special in the way that they, when they interact and when they hunt, since they are carnivores or insectivores, meaning they only eat insects, they have to come out when the insects are coming out. But they aren't going to be most active during the day because it's pretty hot. It's kind of dangerous for them with other predators. So they're active during dawn and dusk, and that is considered crepuscular. So a lot of people think that animals are either awake during the day or awake during the evening, but there's actually a middle ground where a lot of animals are most active. So she's not considered nocturnal because during the largest portion of the evening, she actually sleeps. So these guys sleep a lot of time. I had to wake both of them up in order to do this little show and tell for you guys, and they're probably going to go back to sleep. And I usually feed them in the evening time right before their basking lamps all turn off. And that's really when they get kind of an extra little jazz of energy. But at the end, I might be able to show you Lawrence is all about eating. He's kind of a chubber, so he might go after some food, but Laura got fed yesterday, so she's not super into eating every day. All right, so I'm gonna put her back. And I'm gonna put some crickets in with Lawrence, and I'm gonna see if I can swivel my camera around, maybe, so you guys can see him hunting. It's actually pretty funny because he's not very good at it, and he misses a lot, but he tries really hard. So it's okay to laugh if he misses.
So I'm going to put in the chat box, I'm going to put a link to a really fun paper craft that we've done with some camp kids, if you guys are interested. It does require a printer, but you can print out that little, it'll print out a flat two-dimensional piece of paper, and then when you cut it out and you start to follow the fold lines, you can end up making a super cute leopard gecko. So it's at Creative Park. They have all sorts of little animals that you can, again, called paper crafting, end up with a three-dimensional object from your piece of paper. So if you are interested, you can follow that link. That is one we've done with some of our summer camp kids, and it does end up really cool. It's okay if you mess up and you make a mistake. It's fine. It's not always easy. It's like extreme origami, but you can try it.
All right, let me put a light on top of him so you guys can see him. All right, I did put some little crickets in there. They're not moving right now. Oh.
Now, obviously, if a cricket is not moving, it's really not going to capture their attention. And in the wild, that's fine, because that might mean that the insect is dead and it's not safe for an animal to eat something that has already died and start decomposing. So a lot of our animals, they will only go after something if it's moving.
He just crawled over one, and I think he sees the reflection of them in his glass. Oh.
Now, because Lawrence came to us and we had not raised him, and we know that he had some developmental and physical health, some health issues, we also noticed that he has trouble catching his food. So we don't know if his eyes didn't develop properly, or if it's a hand-eye coordination thing. Sometimes that happens to animals if they've been a little sickly.
Oh, I think he sees it. Well, there it is.
Nice, we got one. And sometimes leopard geckos will twitch their tail in excitement before they do their big grab. I don't know if anyone here has one and they've ever seen that little tail twitch. We've seen Laura do it sometimes, but not as much from Lauren.
All right, so I'm gonna flip my camera back around. All right, perfect. So now that I went back to the questions. Were there any questions that you posted in the?
Yes.
All right, let me
Got a couple in there.
get out of this.
Did you have any mealworms to feed to Daniel today?
I do, but he is too cold right now. I don't think he's gonna eat any. All right, so can you use a heat lamp to help them get vitamin D for calcium production? So the types of lamps that we use for them, they have to be special. They have to say that they're UVA or UVB. So that means that there's that extra kind of sunlight coming through. There are different bulbs that I use. For instance, for Daniel, since he is larger and he prefers to be a little bit hotter, I have special lamps. They're called heat emitting bulbs, and they only emit heat. They don't let off any light or anything. And then there are other light bulbs that maybe are just UVB like the sun and don't produce any heat. So you have to be really careful when purchasing stuff like that, and checking to make sure that you're purchasing the correct bulb. You also don't want to make them too warm. Next question, do Laura and Lawrence live together? They do not live together. For a while, Laura weighed probably 50 grams more than Lawrence did. And since I'm not sure exactly if he's a boy or a girl, they can start having some issues because of their genders, but also it's important for me to know how much each of them is eating. So I like to keep them separate. They are very curious of each other. They do go up to the glass and kind of meet each other. Around dinner time is when I go and check on them again. And they are usually up against the glass next to each other, just kind of like interacting that way. Laura gets really jealous of Lawrence's crickets. She doesn't think her crickets are as good as his crickets. So she gets really jealous that way.
And we did have another question, Miss Marquita. That was, how often and how much do bearded dragons eat? Their class pet seems to be hungry a lot. So did you want to explain how, because Daniel, our bearded dragon, is someone who eats both vegetables and meat, how you've arranged his schedule for his best health?
Yes, so if the bearded dragon that you have at school is still considered like a baby or juvenile, meaning it's still growing, they are furious eaters. They will eat all the time because they're growing. Just like whenever you guys go through growth spurts, or when you were babies, you were having to eat a whole lot more. But as he is now an adult, he doesn't really eat as often. So I've looked up a lot of different ways that you can feed bearded dragons. As babies, they're supposed to be getting a lot of meat, with about a 50% ratio of salads and meat. So we oftentimes would just always have a salad in his tank for him, always fresh, obviously. Every day you would give him a new little chopped salad, and then we would give him meat every other day. as long as he was eating it. But now that he's an adult, he has days where he doesn't eat anything because he's really not hungry as much. But I do notice that whenever he is warmer or a little bit more active, as I'm letting him bask in my windowsills and things, he tends to be a little bit hungrier. But that's true of all reptiles, because since they are cold-blooded, they really can't digest that food unless they are warm, and they really aren't going to feel very hungry if they're too cold. So keeping them warm and then understanding their growth spurts is really helpful. But just make sure that if your bearded dragon is really hungry and is eating all the time, you're providing really healthy food and not just a bunch of fruit and things like that. They really should be getting lots of greens and vegetables that are safe for bearded dragons. A little bit of fruit every once in a while is okay, but they can get addicted to those sweets just like how we can. And it's very difficult to get reptiles to stop eating things you don't want them to eat.
Now, one thing that Miss Marquita is always very excited about, besides when they've eaten, is when they have pooped. So
Yeah.
Ms. Marquita, could you explain very quickly before I tell you the next question that's just popped up, why it's so important to make sure that you've kept track of if your animal has pooped and what that poop looks like?
It's very important to make sure your animal is not only eating, but is also going to the bathroom. So I've been logging when they don't go to the bathroom, because that could mean, one, that they are dehydrated, which means you have to, for Dan's special needs, I give him a bath about twice a week. And during his bath, he will drink water and absorb a little bit of moisture through his scales. But for the other two, if they haven't been eating, they won't go to the bathroom. So that could mean, one, they're not eating enough, or two, that they have an obstruction. So I actually changed what I use for their bedding recently, because I noticed that when they were hunting, they were eating a lot of that substrate at the same time, and it's not very good for them. So on that note, also make sure that whatever is on the bottom of the tank is healthy. And I know that pet stores will say that all of the bedding that they provide is healthy, but I like to put solid down, like newspaper or ceramic tiles and things like that, so that they're not eating substrate on accident.
So we did have a question, and Brian, I will get to your question in a second. I think that's going to be a longer answer. A couple questions. One, do leopard geckos need a special light? And she did mention you will need a light that gives off the UV radiation, so not just a heat lamp, but you can find lights that give off UVA, UVB. That's the ray from the sunlight that they need to absorb. How often should they poop? That depends on your animal. Snakes we feed once a month, so they poop once a month. The leopard geckos eat, if they're eating every day, they're going to poop every day. But our bearded dragons, they don't poop every day, do they?
No, he hasn't been pooping every day, but he also hasn't really been super hungry. He's a little bit more stressed out about the move to my house, so it's been taking him a little bit longer to adjust, but I do notice that once he feels a little bit more comfortable, he's more willing to eat, and he's kind of happier that way. But I make sure that even if he's not eating, I give him as much food as he wants, and also make sure that I'm watching for those bowel movements.
So we had a really good question from Brian. What lizard would you recommend as a pet? And so Ms. Marquita, do you want to talk a little bit about making a choice for bringing an animal to your house?
All right, so we talked a little bit about the lifespan. I think it said that leopard geckos can live for 20 years or something, which is crazy long, but not quite as long as some of our other reptiles like tortoises or turtles. I personally am a little bit on edge about keeping reptiles as pets because they are considered easy pets by pet stores, but I've noticed that my reptiles have had kind of a hard time staying healthy, because anything could get them sick, whether it's their light bulbs are dimmed out or it's too much breeze or whatever. So I think starting small is probably for the best. Is leopard geckos. They are very small. You don't need to provide them with too much excitement in their tank, but also remember that since they are crepuscular, they're not going to be super active during the day. So it's not going to be a pet that you can watch interact with their environment a whole lot, and they're going to be considered kind of boring, I think.
So we did have a question. So someone's brought their classroom bearded dragon back to their house. They said he's been hiding a lot and he's not very social. He's having some trouble adjusting. Do you think that might be that it's he's not as warm as he was before? He's not being handled as much before?
I would say try and make sure that whatever he was getting in the classroom, he's getting here too, whether it's daily interactions with people. I noticed that Daniel was getting kind of sad, so I actually have been propping him up next to the window a lot more so he can notice a lot more stuff. He sees the birds, he sees people walking by, and where he lived before, he saw a lot of people throughout the day because he lived in our office, and I think he really enjoyed that. They're very social animals. They really like to be around people. So even if he doesn't enjoy to be touched, just make sure he's getting that visual stimulus. And do make sure, I do have heat zones in his tank. So make sure that there is a side that's fairly warm, can get to like 90 degrees, and then a cooler side too. And just make sure that your bearded dragon is staying warm. Sometimes Dan gets silly and he puts himself in a cold spot and he looks kind of sad. So I'll pull him back over to the warm spot and he seems to perk up really well after that. But I would just give them a couple of weeks to adjust because it's very traumatizing for them, I think, to be moved back and forth and see different people, different sounds. You might not notice the air conditioning coming on and stuff, and that's being pumped into his tank too. So make sure that the heat in the room is adequate for his lifestyle also.
So back to the question we had on the best kind of, if you were going to bring a reptile home and you were absolutely sure that you were confident you could be around for 20 years to take care of that animal, and if it's a Russian tortoise, maybe 70 years, or you have a plan that you are going to have your parents take care of the reptile when you go to college, and then you're going to take it and you're going to have your kids take care of it. What do you think would be a good reptile that can live in kind of a house structure? One that's, you know, obviously not going to need to have our Russian tortoise goes for long walks, so not really great inside a house. What do you think would be a good one to have in a house?
I think just for like low-key, low maintenance, the snakes are pretty low maintenance. They don't really need to be handled every day. You obviously don't need to feed them every day. You feed them like maybe once a week when they're babies, and then as they get older, maybe every 10 days, every 14 days. The food is a little bit creeps everybody out because you have to have frozen mice to give them after you obviously thaw them before feeding them, but you have to sometimes keep mice in your freezer. But when it comes to a day-to-day maintenance and stuff, snakes are pretty low-key.
And we will be doing, you guys will be meeting our snakes at one of our future webinars. I will be doing live snake feedings. The snakes have been living with me here. But again, anytime you have a pet, decide to get a pet, you do need to talk with your family. Who's going to take care of it when you're off at college? Who's going to take care of it when you go on a vacation? This isn't a vacation, but someone had to take care of them. Before we go, I do just want to share another link. This is another paper craft you can do if you want to create a bearded dragon. Miss Marquita, would you be able to do screen share with, actually I think I can you screen share with me so I can show what those websites look like?
Yes, let me remember how to do that.
All right, so I just want to show you what these websites look like when you go there. Again, if you have access to a printer, you can print these out, and then you just kind of follow the fold lines.
Is it letting you do it now?
Let me try. Nope. Oh, yeah, let me do it. All right, here we go. All right, so this is what the Leopard Gecko one would look like. You would print it off, and then you follow the fold lines. And if you want to make it a little more realistic for the Leopard Gecko and the bearded dragon, remember they do have bumps on their body, so you could come up with different ways to add the bumps. You could use a little hot glue gun to give tiny little dots. I think that would be a good way to do it with the paper. You could also just paintbrush a little glue onto it and then sprinkle some sand. That's my favorite way to turn a drawing of a bearded dragon into one that's a little more tactile. If you just paint with some glue on a paintbrush and then sprinkle sand on it. So if any of you do end up making the Leopard Gecko, this is the paper craft bearded dragon. Definitely take a picture, tag us on social media, share it with us, Sci-Tech Discovery Center. We love to see, and on this one you can even see that they've got the little ear hole there. So then you can set them up with your own little terrarium. If you don't have the bearded dragon, you can create your own little paper one and have a little terrarium. And that would be super awesome.
That would be the easiest reptile to own.
Yes, a paper craft.
That is the kind of animal that I recommend for kids.
Yes.
Paper.
All right, back to you, Miss Marquita.
All right, so let me go back to my screen really quick. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining in. I think this was our largest viewing so far, which is super exciting, but obviously animals, so why wouldn't you come? But we just wanted to thank you for joining us. Remember that next Friday there's another viewing. I think it is the snake feeding next week. But it's gonna
I'll have to let me double check on that. Is it the snake feeding, or do we have the owl pellet dissection?
No, I don't know, one of those, but another junior naturalist at 10:30. We'll be posting links for that for our Zoom meetings and things like that.
They're already on mindstretchingfun.org. We have our What's Happening calendar. They're also on our Facebook page. So next Friday is backyard birding. You will, I will do a owl pellet dissection. You guys are gonna help me identify what bones are in the owl pellet, and then I'm gonna show you how to make a nest or a home to attract a great horned owl to your backyard, which I believe I have in my backyard at the moment.
Hey, Miss Sloan, can you make sure that we post that it's Central Time since we are in
Yes,
Texas?
ma'am.
I am sharing it a lot, and most of my people are from Michigan and Ohio, so there might have been a little bit of a confusion with that. So I apologize if people were logging in at different times. I always forget that with the technology and internet, people could be watching us from everywhere.
I will make sure to put that in all the
Daniel. All right, so once again, thank you guys all for joining this end of our show. I'm gonna stop recording it, so if anybody else, all right, Dan's one on the floor. So if anybody has any other questions or